Okay, so live stream there. All right, I'm Sierra Williams. Thanks for inviting me to speak. I'll remember to actually use it. So yeah, feel free to yell at me if I'm not doing this. Letting out the mic is more the people on the live stream. But I'm really excited to be here, jump in, talk about openness. I think today's event really highlights a lot of really interesting aspects of openness. This idea about inclusiveness, I think, is really important because there's a lot more attention than it gets. But really, what I'm looking to do today is situate openness in scholarly communication a bit further. So hopefully this will be relevant for other presentations as well. Academic publishing is one activity often talked about in relation to openness, but I think there's a lot more to be critically engaging with. And what excites me about today is that the group here today are doing that in so many different ways. The theme of OpenCon is here that I mentioned open in order to, and specifically today, open for, and it provides a really important direction for the discussion. Lots of different activities, but what is it that we're actually trying to achieve? I think that's kind of a scary question. Maybe that's important to recognize that maybe there's a reason we don't recognize this because there's so many different types of things we're trying to achieve. But I think it is important to consider a little bit as well. And so for researchers, I think especially for early career researchers, publishing is seen as this hallowed activity, and there's this aura of intimidation around it. And I think for that reason alone, it's important to really face head on in these discussions. But this talk is designed to look at how openness and scholarly communication fit across what I refer to as the research life cycle. And I'm going to explore that a little bit further. Also looking at some new innovations going on, but also, I think more importantly, some provocations about a system that really has in many ways evolved as a hindrance to science and to research. So what tangible benefits could be gained by building a system with fewer drags? And I think a lot of what goes on when we talk about publishing is interconnected in a web of different relationships. We've got researchers, publishers, librarians, peer reviewers, there's lots, but what's really important, I think, is that they're in this room today, and that's, I think, an excellent starting point, and we can build a lot on that going forward. So a little bit about me and my perspective, and then of course you can judge accordingly. I work at the open access publisher PeerJ, meaning we make all our articles freely available, no login, no subscription required. And we have 2 peer-reviewed journals, one in the biological, medical, and environmental sciences, and one in computer science. And what primarily sets us apart is that we publish based on methodological rigor and not more subjective determinations of impact or novelty. I think this is particularly important for early career researchers. And also, it's important to note that not every research project is going to be groundbreaking, but every finding deserves to be shared. And that's kind of goes through my presentation a little bit. Before PeerJ, I worked at the LSE. I was the editor of the London School of Economics' Impact Blog. From there, a group of us published a book called Communicating Research with Social Media. And it looked to explore, social media is becoming more and more this tool that's used across research and universities. But why and how is it useful for researchers? Is it just another burden, or can we actually situate this a little bit more? And in addition to that, how can we make this easier and more useful, I think, for researchers going forwards? So the central question I wish to pose and explore today is why do researchers share their work? And perhaps differently phrased, What can you gain from the process of communicating your research widely? How can you, best do that? For some of the more practical questions. And I can spoil the presentation a little bit right now and say there's no one answer to that. It's going to be different to every researcher in the room. And I think that's really an important aspect we should consider. The main point is that those differences should also inform how you publish and all your scholarly communications decisions going forward. So I'm not going to go and spend a lot of time into the intricacies of open access publishing, but many open access publishers make research freely available to its readers. There are many ways to achieve this, and I'm not here to say which way is best. But I think we can all agree that with stretched research budgets, looming Brexit, that really what's most important here is the cheapest way of achieving this is really quite beneficial to consider. PeerJ was started in 2012 to look at how open access publishing could be done even more cost effectively and made suitable for the 21st century. There's a lot of wasted time in science publishing itself, product of an outdated print model, from poor submission systems, of which I'm sure you're aware, and also disengaged editorial processes. So we focus on delivering quality and constructive peer review as efficiently as possible, so that the research community can continue to invest time and money in the primary research process. And we hope that can have a cascading effect on the rest of science publishing. So now that open science is pretty well established, I think, and I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but I think it's worth asking, is it making a difference? Now that science is being shared more widely and more freely, is it really being used more widely? These I think are really important questions we should be asking. They're difficult questions, but I think that they worth further exploration. Predictably, the process of how science is communicated and how science makes a difference in the world is in many ways more complicated than our pure embrace of open access research articles. But I do think it's an important prerequisite. Can't stress that enough. And certainly open access has acted as a reinvigoration of our attention on scholarly communication. So for our book, my co-authors and I were really interested to explore how science is shared, and we wanted to make this process less daunting for researchers interested in engaging online. Using newer forms of media and exploring how to break down barriers between science and society. But as is apparent with the rise of fake news and the general ugliness that is social media, sharing science today is messy, and using social media involves risks as well as rewards. Our book doesn't look to shy away from this ugliness, but does look to situate research practices against and alongside these new media and new aspects of new media. So fundamentally, what we stress is that if you look closely at the process of research, here what we call the research lifecycle, every step involves communication. What is important is finding the right medium to assist with your goals. So the life cycle is framed using in vogue language today, impact, engagement, and outreach. But these aren't particularly new for the scientific enterprise. The communications revolution of the 19th century meant citizen scientists, because that's what all scientists were back then, could use new media formats of the day, periodicals, books, new journals, and to make, really the aim was to make science more widely accessible and really invite further participation in the process of science. So rather than being this radical innovation, open access is in many ways part of this much older tradition of using new media to bridge the gap between science and society. Sorry. Yeah. No. Yeah, and so this is really where we're at, that sort of nexus between science and society. So we argue that science itself is a very social process, from inspiration through to its eventual impact in society, and a range of different media have been used over the years to facilitate these processes. Certainly these media should be scrutinized to see how well they are achieving their aims. And this is exactly where I think openness has come in the last decade or so. It provides new ways of achieving the aims of the research life cycle. So, from open citations, being able to reach, what areas are relevant for your research, connecting with future collaborators, with reproducibility, are you able to test their analysis? Is your work being read by those that would actually benefit the most from your research, and are you receiving the feedback from those best able to judge your work? So when you evaluate the medium you're using to achieve your research aims, openness is actually a very logical method to this. So to look at an example of how you might evaluate your own scholarly communication efforts and how you share your work, this is a look at what we provide our authors when they publish with us, to let them know, some suggested ways to take this further. I think what is really valuable from the publisher's side is demonstrating to readers the fruits of this labor. This screenshot was taken on the day of publication. You can see it's got 500 downloads, views, 69 downloads on the first day. That's great. I think that's fantastic. That's what we want to see. About a quarter of that was generated from the author sharing that on Facebook. I think that's really interesting. How can we, what community is there? How can we build that and develop that a little bit more? As an author, I think that's really useful feedback to be able to get. So I'm not saying that we should all be pushing for more views, more likes, more Facebook shares as ends in themselves, but that these can be used as means of achieving wider research aims. And I think that often researchers don't want to promote their work because, they don't want to be that person that they see in the committee meetings, and they think that the right people will just organically find their work. I think this is a really optimistic view. I think, really you've worked months, maybe years on this research. Are you really willing to just leave it up there, for the Google gods to decide who gets to actually discover your work? So I also think researchers can overcome this fear as well if there's a clear goal in mind. Asking, I want to reach these specific people. This idea about that there's a general public out there. Maybe we can drill down a little bit further into what that means. Who specifically would be interested in your findings, and why is this relevant to them? If we think through those questions, I can't think of anyone that wouldn't want to receive that information. Particularly relevant to discussions of openness and inclusion, I think we should also consider the costs of the status quo, relying on traditional mechanisms for people to discover and for your research to be disseminated. In many ways, these serve to perpetuate existing inequalities. Take this list from a publisher circulated earlier this week. I don't know if you've seen it. Brilliant. We've got emojis. We've got social media going on here. A question. That's always good and engaging. It's definitely nodding to more engagement. But what about the content? Who actually is considered an expert here? It didn't take long for people to realize that this list is actually pretty pathetic. Then, a much more engaging thread and experience happened online. So this whole thread, I would definitely encourage you to look it up because it's full of really interesting responses. Pushing back on these ideas of who gets to be an expert and where to access it. So my point here is that research is a social process that can be both good and bad. Our existing hierarchies and social dynamics are often harming the very aims of science. But there's hope in this example. I think that media can be used in ways to challenge those existing hierarchies. Perhaps a facile comparison, but I do think I wanted to use something relevant from this week. I think it does actually, suggest that there is a lot more we can do with this. Right, so now that I've discussed what is scholarly communication in the 21st century and how it can be improved going forward, I'd like to end on why specifically this is relevant for researchers to engage with further. Of course, and that could be useful, in your own work, taking this forward and working with communities to practice in your own ways. Of course, there are a number of general and altruistic reasons, and maybe these get a little bit more attention because of their emotional appeal. But there are, I think, especially sort of queer-specific self-preservationist reasons for challenging the status quo, and I think that's really explored well here in an article by Erin McKiernan, published in Eli, on how open science helps researchers succeed. It goes into a number of these reasons. I think it kind of pushes the conversation forward in a really productive way, and can help you move forward in your conversations that often sort of reach walls. And in the conversations I've been having with researchers over the last few years, it never really takes long for researchers to share feeling trapped in this publication landscape. I don't think anyone needs to be told that the way science is currently communicated is baffling. If not outright contradictory in many ways. So that's almost taken as a given now. So I think we need to push against that in a lot of different ways. I think the hard part is, of course, figuring out where to go from here. Reputations, funding, careers are really at stake, and we have to consider how to move carefully, how to empower, and to recognize that this system is something that all researchers are actually actively participating in. I think that provides a really useful in too. So this quote comes from Karina Logan, an early career researcher here, part of the Bullied into Bad Science campaign, which we'll talk more about later. But her blog post on the PeerJ blog lists a bunch of different practical actions. And I think this campaign, I'm sure we'll explore those actions later in conversations today. But I think this campaign is really important for recognizing that what this change looks like shouldn't come from publishers. It should come from researchers. Publishers are here to respond. We're able to use the means we have available to help move that through and help where we can, of course, but that change really needs to come from researchers themselves, and we need to support that. But again, there's no one answer to what that change actually looks like, and we have to continue to work together across disciplines and organizations to figure out how best to implement that. But let's also work hard to make sure that what doesn't get lost is figuring out how this will benefit the work that researchers are currently doing to share their work more widely. I think that's really at the crux of a lot of what's going on in scholarly communication, and I think it's important to really support and recognize that. Of course, PeerJ is here to help. We've just actually launched a new community website aimed at getting more getting more involvement from our supporters and able to push this through. So yeah, looking forward to speaking with you further on ways we can support you. And yeah, I should say also, I didn't mention, we've got PeerJ preprints, preprint server to share your work for free online, share early versions. If anyone's interested in talking about this, how to get started, I think this is a really great way of getting stuck into open science, and I'm happy to do a little demo or something during lunch. So yeah, just grab me. Great. Yeah. Any questions? Yes. Yes. Sorry, PeerJ.org. Yeah. Yeah, it is beta version, I should say, but we'll be looking to add more ways to get people are getting involved. Yeah, different areas.
I have a question, but could you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sure.
So my question is, so from my point of view, I think a big issue with everything you said, and of course I agree, all the research itself is that for many reasons are not willing to engage. So do you have any advice or strategic point of view, what specific action are you taking to try to engage?
Yeah, so sorry, the question is, what specific actions can we do to really encourage researchers to embrace open access? Again, I think from PeerJ's standpoint, we want to be responsive, available, and I think, being affordable and being easy, I think those are two huge things for a researcher. There's no question that the costs of publishing are a huge barrier to more involvement. I think that's true. But I think actually what seems to be is just the frustration involved with publishing. Being able to communicate that, this, publishing doesn't need to be this painful process. It can actually, be easy, and there's a lot more that publishers can do to make that happen. But I also think we found that to be a really useful for getting more engagement. In terms, that's sort of a publisher-focused response. From my work at LSE, with working with social science disciplines, I think it's just a little bit different. I think the focus, the emphasis there has to be on a little bit more on the practical, what I'm talking about, the actual, what you're looking to achieve with your research. That was the angle that we found worked really well. Actually the question of, why you publish. This is a question that, is obviously really basic, but something that I think a lot of researchers kind of forget. And that's completely fine. We've got careers, we're working, but maybe it's time to sort of take a step back, revisit those essential questions, and then, that might not be open access publishing. That, this actually leads to many different directions, and I think we should value that. Cool.
If someone's got a really high impact study that they want to publish, how do you go about persuading them to publish with OpenConCam as opposed to say something like Nature that might seem to be more prestigious?
Right. So the question is, got a high impact study, how do you persuade someone to publish with, maybe one of these newer journals like PeerJ? Yeah, I think that's I knew that answer, then yeah, that would be brilliant. But I think certainly there is a level of responsibility on behalf of senior researchers. I think for early career researchers, it's a little bit different. I think, we should be focusing on, how this is better for your science, these sort of less altruistic, more career-specific benefits that openness can achieve. But this needs to be a two-pronged approach. We need to also focus on those, bigger impact studies. Yeah, I don't have an answer for that, but I do think that it is a lot about talking about responsibility on the side of the senior researchers to actually not just perpetuate the system that they went through, and but to actually stop and say, that this can really make a difference. Maybe we just focus on early career researchers as well. Maybe it is about sort of getting that change to come from that direction. But I think things could be really sped up if we did focus a little bit on the responsibility shared by all. Oh, yeah.
Do you have an example of how you managed to provide something more that kind of promoted the researcher published with PHA, because the idea that we need to publish in some journals because it's good for our career. So maybe if you have counterexamples, you have examples saying, look, this person published somewhere else, and that is exactly why they succeeded.
Right. Yeah. So case studies. Sorry, I should rephrase your question. So you're saying how can we as publishers demonstrate and maybe develop case studies of when a researcher had used openness and that's benefited their careers. I think that's brilliant. That's definitely something we want to do more of. We have at PRJ, we have examples. We have, and those are sort of like shining examples. But how can we build that repository? And maybe we could work across publishers as well. I think that would be really useful. I think actually, the openinorders2.org website, I don't know if anyone's come across this, that actually features a bunch of these really tangible case studies that we can point to. In talking with them, it seems like maybe there's more we can do as publishers to develop those, whether it's in blog posts or on these other websites too. Putting me on the spot to come up with an example off the top of my head, and I'll come back. But I do think that there are ways we can highlight these better, and maybe it doesn't need to be each publisher developing their own case studies, and that maybe it would be worthwhile doing across journals. Great. Well, looking forward to talking with you all further and hearing further conversations.